වාණිජ, විද්‍යා, ගණිත, කලා, තාක්ෂණ වේදය, විෂය ධාරාවන් වල සියලුම විෂයන් සඳහා විශ්වවිද්‍යාල කතිකාචාර්යවරුන් සහ රජයේ පාසල්වල ප්‍රවීණ ආචාර්ය මණ්ඩලය විසින් මෙහෙයවනු ලබන දේශන නැනපවුර YouTube channel ඔස්සේ නැරඹිය හැක. ඉදිරි දේශන දැනගැනීම සඳහා නැනපවුර YouTube channel subscribe කරන්න. දැයි දූ දරුවන්ගේ අනාගත ජයග්‍රහණයට.
Hello everyone, now we are going to start our business studies lecture. So, Madam Sanjeevani joins with us today, and the friends who could not attend today can watch today's lecture on our YouTube channel. And don't forget to subscribe our channel. So, I invite our Madam Sanjeevani who is joining with us today. Hello Madam.
Hello, thank you very much. Good evening, children. All right. So, we'll start the lesson today. So, we are hoping to start our third unit. I'll share the screen now. All right, so this is your unit 3, and now already we have completed unit 1 and unit 2. So both the units we completed, so we have come to unit 3 now. So this is about interaction between government and business. All right. Hope you can see the screen. All right. So first thing that we need to know is how can these business, like now if you have a business, I always tell you all, like if you like business people, I mean students who are studying business studies, you need to think you have your own business, right? So now here we'll see how the government interferes the businesses, right? There are ways in which that the government influence the businesses, right? So now if they ask a question, what are the ways that the government influence the business? These are the 3 ways: from central government, from provincial councils, and local authorities. So what do you mean by local authorities? Urban council is there, town councils are there, municipal councils are there. So these are local authorities, children. Right? Now, these are the ways that the government influence occurs on business. Right now, these are the ways that government influence businesses. But if they ask the examples, the ways that government influence business, now here are the examples. So now we'll see. Now, first thing, by providing infrastructure. How do they provide infrastructure? So you can discuss under those 3 headings. Right? Central government, how do they provide infrastructure facilities? Providing electricity. So provincial councils, but how do they provide infrastructure facilities? They maintain roads. That's done by provincial council. So that is infrastructure facilities. Right? So that is how the government help you all. And local authorities, how can they help? They remove waste, right? Garbage. So that is one. So that we have discussed by providing infrastructure. That is one example. So this example you need to divide into 3 and discuss. All right. Then if you take as a competitor, by being a competitor, government can help the businesses. How can the government be a competitor, children? So now if you take the central government, now if they have a sector TV channel, and if the private sector is also having a TV channel, so if they can provide a better service, like then if they can be a tough competitor, right, with you, so then that is how they being a competitor, they act as a competitor. So if it's a provincial council, they conduct business competitively with the private sector, right? And even the local authorities also they do. How do? They build up markets and rent in them for the private sector. So government can, through the local authorities, they can build up some markets, children, and they can, rent them. They can rent these markets to private sector, right? So that is for being a competitor, right? So we discussed what? By providing infrastructure. Now these are the examples, children, okay? So don't mix up. So first thing what we discussed was the ways in which that the government influence the business. So what are the ways? Central government, provincial council, local authorities. So if they ask the examples, now these are the examples. The first one, by providing infrastructure. The second one, by being a competitor. Then what is the third one? By being a customer. How can the government be a customer, children? Now see, if you take the central government, they can buy paddy. So when they are cultivating paddy, the government can buy paddy, right? So they can buy paddy from various, sellers, or else they can buy various office equipment, right? So then after that, now after buying paddy, previous example, they can sell through Satosa. That's how the government as a customer, how can the government as a customer help the business? Then provincial councils, they provide and they receive defense service, right? So then if you take local authorities, this has to come here. Local authorities, they maintain cemeteries. So this is as a customer, children. Then government can form policies. So what are the ways in which the government can form policies? Now, if you take the central government, they implement monetary and fiscal policy. So this sector we are discussing today, right? Monetary and fiscal policy. Then provincial council, they can implement business names charter, right? So all the businesses, names of the businesses they can have, right? So they can implement that. Then local authorities, they can implement environmental policies. So these are the ways in which that the policies have been formed by the government, right? Then we'll see the other one, the other example, by imposing rules and regulations. Now the central government, Consumer Affairs Authority Act or the Standards Act, right? So that is an example for rules and regulations. Then if you take provincial council, they impose rules and regulations for the private buses. Then local authorities, they pass the plan for buildings, or they can impose some rules for relevant for buildings, right? That is done under local authorities. So that is the other example, by imposing rules and regulations. Then being a tax collector, government act as a tax collector. Now the central government, they collect tax through Inland Revenue Department. If you take provincial council, they collect tax through Provincial Revenue Department. Then if you take local authorities, they collect rates from houses, right? So this is as being a tax collector, right? So now once again, now these are the examples on how government interferes in businesses, children, right? So first thing, by providing infrastructure. Second one, by being a competitor. Then third, by being a customer. Then fourth one, by forming policies. Then by imposing rules and regulations. Then by being a tax collector, right? So these are the ways. Then we'll see the importance of assistance and guidance that business receives from the government. So now if you have a business, you can do the businesses without the guidance of the government. Why do you think the government should support you? Why? Government should assist you. Why do you think so? Being forward to register the business. Now suppose that you have a business, you need to register the business. So you need to go to divisional secretarial and get registration. So that means you need the help of the government, right? And the goodwill of the business is also will improve, because if the government support is there, right? And you can contribute to the development of the country also, children. And also you receive the acceptance of the government and public. So these are the importance of assistance and guidance that businesses receive from the government. Then now we'll see the government. Now you as businessmen, right? You also have some goals. You as students, you have some goals, right? I as a teacher, I have a goal, right? So likewise, we have some goals in our lives. So like that, so government also has some goals, right? We'll see the economic goals of the government. So what are the economic goals of the government? The first one is economic growth and development, right? What is this economic growth and development, right? This is like, you need to know now, sometimes they ask the term development to write the definition of development, right? So here in this para, I describe what development as well. Okay, now here it says, while economic development takes place through the continuous growth of the production process. Now, if you are producing continuously, right? So you can see like there is a growth. In addition to that, the long-term growth of human and social indices is known as development. So what is development? Long-term growth of human and social indices. So economic growth and development is that. You need to have continuous growth of the production process as well as the long-term growth of human and social indices. Both have to be there. So, right? So then if the both has to be there, so that is economic growth and development, right? So that's the first economic goal of the government, right? Economic growth and development. Then the second one is full employment. That is another economic goal. So the government has a goal, I mean, economic goal as to provide job opportunities, right, to everyone. So that is full employment. Not only everyone who wishes to provide their labor has been occupied in a service, but also a situation where all the resources have been occupied, right? But how? In an effective manner, right? In an effective production activities in the economy. That is full employment, right? Not only one or two, not only those who wish to have wish to provide the service, but also to everyone. Okay, so that is full employment. Increase in the living standard as the definition of economic development. Yes, you can. That is also you can. Right? And then fair income distribution. That is another economic goal. Fair income distribution. So not only one person is having a high income, the other person is having a low income. That is not fair income distribution. So the income has to be distributed equally among all the people in that country. That is fair income distribution, right? Distributing of total production of a country equally among all the people in that country. That is fair income distribution. So once again, we will see economic growth and development, then full employment, third one, fair income distribution. Now, fourth one, economic stability. So what is this economic stability? So it is that can be done nationally and internationally. So if you have economy nationally and internationally without a crisis, so that is economic stability. That we don't have in Sri Lanka now, right? We don't have that stabilized economic system here nowadays, right? So we are facing a crisis. So that is we don't have here. So but economic stability is without a crisis, right? So that has to be there in nationally and internationally. Okay, so when discussing economic stability, children, there are two parts that we can describe under economic stability. First one, internal price stability, right? Second one, external price stability. What is internal price stability? While controlling inflation, if you are stabilizing the price level, right? So you need to control the interest rate as well. So if you do that within the country, that is internal price stability, right? So you reduce the inflation, you are stabilizing the price level, you are controlling the interest rate. That is internal price stability. So what is external price stability? Stability of foreign exchange rate, right? That you do externally, no, right? Foreign exchange with other countries. So that is external price stability. So remember, economic stability is like where that you have nationally and internationally without a crisis, right? Economic stability is that. So it has two parts, whereas internal price stability and external price stability. All right, then we'll see the fifth one. Fifth economic goal, favorable international trade. So if you protect the state, the country, and the balance of payment, difference between import and export through conducting foreign trade activities satisfactorily, that is expected from this. That is favorable international trade, right? So you have a balance of payment through conducting foreign trade activities. All right, this is favorable international trade. Right now, we'll see once again what are the economic goals of the government. First one, economic growth and development. Second one, full employment. Third one, fair income distribution. Fourth one, economic stability. So I told you it has two parts, whereas internal price stability and external price stability. Then fifth one is favorable international trade. Okay, so now we discussed about economic goals of the government. Then the way in which that the business contribute to achieve the economic goals. Now those are the government's economic goals. No? So as as businessmen, how can you help to achieve those economic goals? Now we have businesses, right? So how can we help the government to achieve those economic goals? Now these are the ways. You can pay taxes continuously without failing, right? You pay taxes where that you should pay to the government, right? Without sometimes you 1 or 2 months you don't pay. So without doing that, you need to pay prompt tax payments. Then you need to use indigenous resources, right? So local resources, if you are using, that is also a kind of help that you try to help, that is a kind of help that you the way that you try to help the government to achieve the economic goal, right? So what is the first one? Payment of taxes. Second one, use of indigenous resources. Now then third one, following policies that the government implements. Now government, it has some rules and regulations to children. So if you are following those things, that is another way that you can contribute to achieve those economic goals, right? And following policies, right? So now government has some policies, right? Fiscal policy, monetary policy, right? So if you can follow these policies also in a proper manner, that is another way that you can help to achieve those economic goals, right? Then the other way is you can provide some jobs in your organization, right? In the organization, you can provide some jobs. So you can contribute to the employment, right? So then if you provide jobs, the government can achieve that full employment. The goal, full employment, they can achieve that if you can provide jobs from the organization, right? So, and the other thing, you can minimize damages to the environment. So if you do some productions, you need to use eco-friendly production system, right? And without polluting the environment, if you can do, minimizing the damages, if you can produce, that is another way for, as businessmen, that you can help the government to achieve those economic goals, right? So now, once again, I'll discuss this, the ways in which that the businesses contribute to achieve the economic goals. What are those ways? Payment of taxes, use of indigenous of resources, following policies that the government implements, then following the rules and regulations, contribution to the employment, minimize damages to the environment, right? Then there is a mutual relationship among the government and businesses. So what is this? What is this mutual relationship? Now, businesses are motivated when essential facilities are rendered by the government. Now you have a business. Suppose that you have a business, then the government is supporting you, when the government is motivating you, and providing some resources, you will be motivated, right? As businessmen, that we will be motivated. So now the government is supporting you, facilitating you. So in the same way, through the development of businesses, the goal of the government also can be fulfilled. So if you are developing your business, so economic goals of the government also can be fulfilled. That is another way. Also, because of the development of business, the government can receive tax income. So you are helping each other, right? This income, what can the government do for this income? They can use for the development of infrastructure and other functions, right? So therefore, it is important to build up a mutual relationship. So that is the mutual relationship among the government and the business, right? So government is giving you resources, so you produce and then you will be motivated. So in the same way that you develop the business, then you provide job opportunities, so the government can achieve those economic goals, and also you can develop the business. From that you can pay the taxes to the government, so government receives a tax income. So, and the other way, the government can use that tax income for the infrastructure, right? So that is the mutual relationship among the government and business. Okay. Now, I told you, there are the policies. Now, the first policy is fiscal policy that we are discussing here. What is this fiscal policy? The functions done by the government related to its revenue and expenditure. Basically, government income, government expenses, right? So that's known as fiscal policy, right? Government income and government expenditure. That's fiscal policy. So what is the goal of this fiscal policy? It is to protect the macroeconomic stability, children. So you need to know the goals of the fiscal policy and the other policy as well. So what is the goal of the fiscal policy? To protect the macroeconomic stability. This is the only answer that you can write for this. No other answers for this, right? So goal of the fiscal policy is to protect the macroeconomic stability. Then government revenue. We'll see what government revenue is. The revenue of how can the government receive the income from the tax or non-tax, right? So the main income of the government is tax and non-tax, right? There is a part that you get as taxes. There is a part that you get as non-taxes. Now we'll discuss that later. Okay, that is the government revenue, children. So what is government expenditure? The total expenditure done within the year for recurrent and capital expenditure, right? So the budget proposal of a government reflects its fiscal policy. So from where that you can see the fiscal policy, the budget proposal of a government that reflects its fiscal policy. All right, then now here you can see this is government revenue, right? So how can you divide this government revenue? Tax revenue and non-tax revenue, right? So this is government revenue. Now we'll see tax revenue. So what is tax? How do you define tax? It is a must payment imposed on a person or an institute by the government. Okay, so that is easy, children, right? So everything you can't by heart now because you have to study 18 units, right? So you should have your techniques to memorize these things, right? So now tax, you need to know that's a must payment, right? Imposed on whom? Person or the institute, right? By whom? By the government. Okay, so that's tax income. So tax income can be classified as direct and indirect. So what is direct taxes? Tax that is charged on income or assets of business and has to be paid by relevant party itself. So the difference between direct tax and indirect tax is, children, direct tax you cannot transfer to anybody, right? You have to pay from yourself. But indirect tax, you can transfer this, right? So direct tax that is charged on income or assets of business and has to be paid by relevant party itself. But indirect tax, tax that is charged on goods and services and can be transferred to another party, right? So that is indirect tax, children. All right. So then I can just show you this, the flow chart. 1 minute, because we have not come to that no still, right? So income tax. So now before that, I'll show you the flow chart of this. Right now here, hope you can see the flow chart, government revenue, tax revenue and non-tax revenue. So how tax revenue, how can you divide? Income tax, value-added tax, excise duties, custom duties and taxes. So these are the ways that you can divide tax revenue, right? So income tax, value-added tax, excise duties, custom duties and other taxes. I'll be explaining each and every one. Okay, so go back to the presentation. Right, now we'll see direct tax and indirect tax. Again, what is the difference between direct and indirect tax? Direct tax that is charged on income or assets, right, where that you cannot transfer. Indirect tax, tax that is charged on goods and services and can be transferred. All right, so then what is income tax? Now, the tax that is imposed on the income of the individual and institute, that is income tax, right? So value-added tax, the tax that is imposed on the added value of goods and services, right? So when you are taking material, you are paying the person, right? So he's transferring his tax burden to you. Now, when you take the material and when you produce, your tax burden you are transferring to consumer, right, by pricing it. So that is value-added tax. Okay. Now, tax on added value on wholesale and retail sale. Tax on added value on exports. That is value-added tax. All right. Then excise duties. What is this excise duties? The tax that is imposed on some products produced within the country, normally for liquor products, tobacco products. That is excise duty. So what's custom duty? The tax charged by the custom department on importing products from foreign countries. So this is custom duty, right? If you pay taxes for imported motor vehicle, that is custom duty. Then there are some other taxes as well, right? The taxes charged from other parties apart from the above taxes, right? So for development taxes, then harbor and airport, levy of cess, telecommunication tax. So these are other taxes. Then we'll see non-tax revenue of the government, right? So there are non-tax also. Now I will show you the flow chart for non-tax revenue. 1 minute. Right. So now you can see this flow chart, government tax revenue. There are two parts, direct tax and indirect tax. So direct tax, what comes under direct tax? Individual tax, income tax, corporate tax, national building tax, and capital gain tax. So if you take indirect tax, value added tax, custom duties, excise duties, right? Then if you take non-tax revenue, these are the non-tax revenue. Profits and dividends, right? So if you earn profit or the dividends from the government institution, that is non-tax. That cannot be treated as tax, right? So that is non-tax. Then charges and fees. Charges for motor vehicle license, interest income, Then now, if you get some revenue from lotteries, that is also considered as non-tax revenue. So these are non-tax revenue, children. What are non-tax revenue? Profits and dividends, charges and fees, interest income, and other income as revenue from lotteries. All right. So this is the non-tax revenue flow chart. Then we'll go back to our presentation. Then we'll see the government expenditure. Now we discussed about government revenue, right? Government revenue is the government income, right? How can the government gain the income? From tax and non-tax, right? So the second one is government expenditure, right? Government expenditure also you can divide into two: recurrent expenditure and capital expenditure, right? So what is recurrent expenditure? Recurrent expenditure is, children, if you do that expenditure, right, again and again, right? So that is known as recurrent expenditure. If you pay salaries and wages every month, right? So pensions every month, right? Interest every month, right? So that is recurrent expenditure because you just continuously paying that again and again. Okay, that's recurrent expenditure. Then capital expenditure, you don't do like the way that recurrent expenditure, right? Every month you don't do that, right? You do that for a long-term investment, right? So now you're constructing a main road, but every month you don't do that, no? Every year you don't do that. Construction of bridges, right? Every day or every month or every year you don't do that. You do that for as a long-term investment, right? That's capital expenditure. So once again, government expenditure can be two types: recurrent expenditure and capital expenditure. All right. Then we'll see few examples for the impact on businesses from government fiscal policy. Right now, first policy is fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is mainly government expenditure and government revenue. Government expenditure, first of all, government revenue is the tax income and non-tax income. Government expenditure is divided into two as recurrent and capital. All right, so then few examples for the impact on businesses from a government fiscal policy. So when imposing custom duties for imported goods, then what will happen? Imports become limited, right? And Indian production can be improved, right? So by imposing taxes on Indian products, what will happen? The prices of goods and services also will be increased. Then government spends on infrastructure facilities, business activities are made simple. So I will just tell you in this manner. Now suppose you are producing mats, right? So when you produce mats, you are just using inland resources, right? You have to find resources here and labor here, right? So then cost of a mat is pretty expensive, right? Because you need to, incur all the cost, right? So handmade one, right? Then it is cost. Then if the cost, like the government, if other businesses, if there are parallelly some other businesses, if businessmen, if they can, import some mats from another countries for a cheaper price, what will happen to you, right? Your business is not protected, no? But if the government can impose a high duty, custom duty for the imported mats or imported goods, what will happen to your product? So that will be protected, right? Your inland production can be improved. So government do that to encourage and to discourage, children, right? So if the government wants to encourage your business, they can impose a high duty for imported goods. If they want to discourage your business, they can release that duty. Then what will happen? Your business is not protected. All the people will buy those mats from other countries for cheaper prices, right? So these are some examples for the impact on businesses from government fiscal policy. So that means in another way, government can control your businesses, right? All right. Then the next one is monetary policy. So now the first policy is fiscal policy, that is government income and expenditure. Then the next one is monetary policy. What is this monetary policy? Policy that a government follows to control the money supply of a country. All right, so this is regarding money supply. If the government control the money supply, that is monetary policy. So who execute this monetary policy? The Central Bank of Sri Lanka execute this on behalf of the government, right? So remember who executes? Central Bank of Sri Lanka, right? But on behalf of the government, it does it, right? So what is monetary policy? Basically, the controlling of money supply. Then the main aim of the government monetary policy. What is the main aim of the government monetary policy? That is to maintain the stability of the price of a national economy. Right now, I gave you the main aim of the fiscal policy as well. Now, here the main aim of the government monetary policy. What is the government monetary policy? Maintain the stability of the price of a national economy, right? Or else you can say controlling of inflation, right? Stabilization. They want to stabilize the economic system, right? That's the main aim. Then to have that, right, to execute this, they can have some instruments, children, right? So there are instruments that you can use to execute government monetary policy. The first instrument is interest rate, right? So what's this interest rate? This is the main instrument, right? So what is this? This they use to control the money supply, right? So we'll see the interest rate can be three types: standing deposit facility rate, standing lending facility rate, and bank interest rate. These are the three parts of interest rates: standing deposit facility rate, standing lending facility rate, and bank interest rate. Now we'll see what standing deposit facility rate. This is, if you check like the past papers, you can see several times that they have asked the difference between standing deposit facility rate and standing lending facility rate, right? So they check. So nothing you can just set aside, children, here. You can't say this is not relevant, this is only relevant. You can't say such thing here, business studies, right? So almost everything is important and interconnected, right? Then standing deposit facility rate, this is the interest rate paid when commercial banks and primary dealers invest their surplus funds in the government securities. When these commercial banks and primary dealers, when they invest their surplus funds, extra funds in government securities. So now if they pay the interest rate, that is standing deposit facility rate. So the main thing that you need to know is interest rate paid. Okay, that's the main part here, interest rate paid. So what is interest standing lending facility rate? This is the interest rate charged by the central bank. So when the commercial banks, primary dealers, when they obtain funds by pledging government securities, right? So then the interest rate charged by the central bank is known as standing lending facility rate, right? So this is the main part of it, interest rate charged and interest rate paid. These are the main two things that you need to memorize, right? So what is the other one? Bank interest rate. This is the interest rate that the central bank as a final loan provider charges from the commercial banks who have obtained loans for liquidity issues. So this is not the bank interest rate, is not the interest rate that you, when you obtain a loan from the commercial bank, the interest rate that you need to pay. This is not that. This is now when the commercial banks, now just as us, the commercial banks also have some liquidity issues. If they don't have much money, they also take loans from the central bank, because central bank is the banker's bank, right? When they obtain loans, right? So the interest rate charged by the central bank from them is known as bank interest rate. Okay, so the interest rate is the main instrument that they use to control the money supply. So interest rate you can divide into three: standing deposit facility rate, standing lending facility rate, and bank interest rate. Then if you take the second instrument, that is changing statutory reserve requirements. What is statutory reserve requirements? Now children, the commercial banks, they also should maintain a certain amount at the central bank, right? So they need to deposit a certain amount at the central bank. Now the central bank increase that amount as well as central bank decrease that amount. So if the central bank wants to control the money, reduce the money supply, what can the central bank do? Right? They can increase the deposit amount. Right? So when the commercial banks deposit more at the central bank, the commercial banks, they have little money. So the money supply decreases. Think in that manner practically. Right? So if the central bank wants to, increase the money supply, they can reduce that deposit statutory reserve requirement, right? So that means they can reduce the amount that the commercial bank should keep. Then what will happen? They have a lot of money then, commercial banks. So then the money supply increase. Okay, so this is changing statutory reserve requirements, right? So now central bank can, if they want to increase the money supply, also that they will change the deposit amount. If they want to decrease the money supply, also that they will increase or decrease the deposit amount. Okay, so that you need to know, that is changing statutory reserve requirement, right? So what is that? The amount of deposit that commercial bank should maintain at central bank, right? Then third one is open market operation. So what is open market operation? Buying and selling of government securities by the central bank. Now suppose that I'm the central bank and you are the commercial banks, right? So what I'm asking, now I'm selling my securities, right? When I'm selling securities, you need to purchase the securities from me, So when you're purchasing securities from me, from the commercial bank, what will happen to your money? You are giving it to me. So what will happen to your money then? Reduces. That means money supply decreases, right? So if I'm buying from you, I'm the central bank, I'm buying securities from you, right? So then what will happen to my money? I'm giving to you all, right? Then your money increases. That means money supply increases. That is open market operation. Buying and selling of government securities by the central bank, right? That's open market operation. Then fourth one is changing the discount rate. Change in the discount rate, the money supply of an economy can be controlled through change in the discount rate, right? So when who have bought government securities, they can discount them at commercial banks before their maturity date. So from that is another instrument that they can use. Then, then they can impose credit limits. So what is this? Credit limits, you can have it in two ways. Imposing credit limits can be two ways. Imposition of quantitative credit limits and qualitative credit limits. So what is this quantitative credit limits? Controlling of total credit by increasing and decreasing bank credits, right? So now quantity in the sense number wise, children. Now they can set minimum ratio between assets and capital. They can set minimum money to be deposited, right? When issuing letters of credit. So that is quantitative, number wise. So the other one is imposition of qualitative credit limits. This is not from the numbers, right? So this is from quality, right? Now, such as recommending fields of providing loans, right? Such as agriculture, entrepreneurs. So that is qualitative credit limits. All right. Now here, once again, I'll tell you, these are the instruments that are used to execute government monetary policy. Interest rate, then interest rate is three types: standing deposit facility rate, standing lending facility rate, then bank interest rate. right? So then second one is changing statutory reserve requirements, then open market operations, then fourth one, change in the discount rate. Then fifth one, imposing credit limits, right? So these are the instruments that we can use to control money supply. Then impact of monetary policy on business. Now this is also important. Now fiscal policy also I told you, now here impact of monetary policy on business. What is the impact of this monetary policy on business? Now here I just drive in this manner, so that will be very easy for you to grasp. Okay, now see the first one. The interest rate of central bank is reduced. Now the central bank interest rate they have reduced. Then what will happen? Commercial banks also they will reduce the interest rate. Then now the investors they borrow loans, they obtain loans because the interest rate is low. Then what will happen? From that, increase the investment. Then when they invest more, production increases, right? When the production increases, price of goods and services you can reduce because you have more products, right? When the price of the goods and services reduced, sales will increase, right? When the sale is increasing, ultimately profit increases, right? This is the impact of monetary policy on business. Now we'll see the other way now. Now, if the interest rate of central bank is increase, what will happen? Now that is decrease, no? Then what will happen if they increased? Then interest rate of commercial banks also will increase. Then will the investors obtain loans? No, right? They will not. They will reduce of obtaining loans. Then decrease the investment. Then production is also decreasing. Then what will happen? Price of the goods and services increase. Then sales of goods also decreasing. Then what will happen? Then decrease the profit. That's the opposite of it. So separately you need to know what will happen. The interest rate of the central bank is increased, and what will happen? The interest rate of the central bank decreases. All right. That's about the government policies, children, fiscal policy and monetary policy. So now we are discussing about the interaction between government and businesses. Now in that lesson, we need to discuss about consumer protection as well. So what is consumer protection? How do you define consumer protection, children? What is consumer protection? It is the legal cover that ensures customer receives sufficient satisfaction for the money he pays. Now, if you as a consumer, right? If you get the satisfaction for the amount that you pay, that is consumer protection, right? So that will protect you legally. All right. So then, reasons for the need of consumer protection. Why consumer protection is needed, children? Now there are a lot of goods and services in the market, right? So you don't know what to choose, right? So then you need a proper, guidance. So you need a protection because of that, right? That is one reason for the need for consumer protection, right? Then since the increased competition, huge competition, one is competing with the other and the other one is competing with another one. So there's huge competition, right? And because of this, there is more chances for malpractices in the market. So you need protection, right? So you need a place to go and complain, and you need a place to forward your grievances. That is another one. And the other one, market is also has become complex with the free trade. So any product that you can buy from another country, anything that you can sell to another country. So because of that, because of the complexity of the market, right? So there should be consumer protection also. And the deterioration of society and culture that can happen with globalization, right? So, different sort of goods that you get to the country, right? So then there should be a protection. The need for making consumers aware to avoid environmental pollution. Also, another reason for the need for consumer protection. Then we'll see advantages for consumers from consumer protection. So what are the advantages that you gain as consumers because of consumer protection? You get an opportunity, children, to consume products that give a value to the paid money. So if you are paying and if you get the satisfaction for that relevant amount that you paid, right? So that is an advantage as consumers that you gain. And if you can protect from trade malpractices also, that is also another advantage. And since consuming quality goods and services and consumers' health and protection is also ensured, so this is this has some standards so that you're protected. Then because of the consumer protection, legal cover is obtained, right? That is also an advantage. And suitable environment is there for consumers to live because you are protected, right? Then advantages for businessmen. So now that one, earlier one was for advantages for consumers, from consumer protection. From businesses' perspective, what are the advantages that the businessmen gain? Now, if you having a business, if you sell goods which have high quality standard products, so then what will happen? You can, gain consumers' trust, right? So the good will increase. Then profit will also increase, right? Turnover will increase. Then reduction of waste because you are producing according to the standards, right? And that will be created a favorable business environment since there is no unfavorable or anti-competitive practices. Okay, so these are the advantages for businessmen from consumer protection. All right, so now you should know the advantages for consumers from consumer protection, and you need to know the advantages for businessmen from consumer protection. Then we'll see consumer rights. Now, children, there are consumer rights declared by John F. Kennedy and as well as consumer rights declared by Consumer International. Right, so separately you should know these things, right? So you need to know what consumer rights declared by John F. Kennedy and consumer rights declared by Consumer International. All right, so now we will see what John F. Kennedy has introduced. So now these are the consumer rights that he has put forward. Right to safety. So what is right to safety? What do you mean by right to safety? Right to safety is, children, consumers now use numerous goods and services, right? So then you have a right to select goods or services, right, which which will be appropriate for your health and for your safety. That is right to be safety. Okay, then if you take right to be informed, what is that? So then now right to be informed in the sense, children, now consumers buy goods and services to fulfill your needs and wants, right? So then consumer has a right to obtain relevant information regarding to that. Now when you go and choose the product, right? So if you don't know the information about these things, now if you have a right to ask and to get educated, right? How to use this, whether there are any side effects. That's right to inform, right to be informed, right? Then right to choose in the sense, then abundant goods and services in the market, right? You have a right to choose the proper one, right? The seller cannot stop, right? The seller cannot say, no, you can't, you touch this and you need to buy that. No, there's no such thing. You have a right to choose the proper one, which is suitable to you. Okay, then right to be heard in the sense, then you have a right to forward your grievances, right? So there is, if you feel that is not suitable, there should be a place for you to forward your grievances. That is right to be heard. All right, so then what is right? Consumers' rights declared by John F. Kennedy: right to be safety, right to be informed, right to be right to choose, and right to be heard. Then consumer rights declared by Consumer International, right? And other thing, children, now normally you will get a small case and then you need to identify which right they discuss under this case, right? So that is the one that is expecting from you all. Otherwise they don't ask right for consumer rights declared by John F. Kennedy, nothing like that, right? You need to know what all these things properly, because they will give you a small case and then you need to recognize what consumer right that they are discussing in this case. All right. Then consumer rights declared by Consumer International. So what are the 4 consumer rights declared by Consumer International? Right to satisfaction of basic needs. So if you're buying a good or a service, that has to satisfy your basic needs. Okay, and right to redress in the sense that you have a right to forward your complaint and you get the compensation, right? So if it is not suitable and if they have cheated, so you have a right to get the money back. That is right to redress. Then right to consumer education is that you have a right to get the knowledge about the product that you are consuming, right? And right to live in a healthy environment is that you have a right to live in a healthy environment by consuming the healthy product. Okay, so these 4 consumer rights are declared by Consumer International. Now, what are 4 consumer rights declared by John F. Kennedy? Right to safety, right to be informed, right to choose, right to be heard. Then what are consumer rights declared by Consumer International? Right to satisfaction of basic needs, right to redress, right to consumer education, and right to live in a healthy environment. Then those are consumer rights. No, now there are some consumer responsibilities also, right? You as consumers, you also have some responsibilities. Critical awareness, right? Active participation, right? So you need to actively participate. Social concern and environmental awareness, cooperation. These are consumer responsibilities. So separately, consumer rights and consumer responsibilities you need to know, right? So critical awareness, active participation, social concern, environmental awareness, and cooperation. These are the only consumer responsibilities that you need to know. Then there are certain government institutions that work for consumer protection, children, right? So Consumer Affairs Authority, that's the main institute, right? Government institute. Now, if you feel that you have misled, you can, forward your grievance, your complaint to Consumer Affairs Authority. So they will take necessary actions. Then Sri Lanka Standard Institution, then Measurement Units, Standards and Services Department, Central Environmental Authority, Office of the Divisional Medical Officer of Health, and District Secretarial Office. So these are government institutions. Then what are the goals of this Consumer Affairs Authority, children? Now that's the main thing, no? Consumer Affairs Authority, what are their goals? The main thing is to protect consumers against selling goods or providing services which are hazardous. Sorry, right? That's the main thing. And to protect consumers against unfair trade practices. Then to ensure that whenever possible, consumers have adequate access for goods and services, right? At competitive prices. And to seek redress against unfair trade practices, right? That is also one of the goals. Then as well as you need to know the functions of Consumer Affairs Authority. So what are the functions, children? Now the goals are separately that you need to know. Then functions are separately that you need to know. So what are the functions of Consumer Affairs Authority? Control or eliminate restrictive trade agreements among entrepreneurs. Right? If there are some restrictive trade agreements, they can control, or else they can eliminate. Then they can eliminate abuse of dominant positions with regard to domestic trade or economic development within the market. Right now, sometimes there can be a monopolistic situation. They can, reduce those things. They can eliminate any restraint of competition. Now, if the competition is also good, children, but if it is adversely affecting, so then they have to control that, right? So investigate or inquire into anti-competitive practices, right? And they have, now it is kind of a function, right? They investigate that. They maintain and promote effective competition, and they promote and protect the rights and relationships of consumers with respect to the prices, right? So these are the functions of Consumer Affairs Authority. Then why Consumer Affairs Authority is important, children? Right now, these are the importance of Consumer Affairs Authority. Now, since production, supply, storing, transporting, and selling take place according to the standards that are imposed by the authority, profit will increase. Right? Why? You can reduce the waste because you are producing according to the standards. Okay, then ultimately you can catch hold of consumers' trust. Okay, and because you are protecting consumer rights, and the image of the institute will grow, goodwill. Okay, you can minimize the legal situations. Now, if you don't give them a proper quality product, if you mislead only, that they will file, or they can go for legal situations too, they can file a case against you. But if you provide quality products, right, if you provide them a proper standard products, so there's nothing for you to worry about, right? So that will minimize legal situations, that will minimize unwanted competition. Okay, ability to compete fairly, since no monopoly conditions, right? So monopoly, that's only one person in the market, so there's no such thing, you can compete fairly, right? Then what are the aims of Sri Lanka Standards Institution? That's another government institution, no? Right? Sri Lanka Standard Institution. So here, according to your this thing, like you don't want to know all these government institutions, their functions, their aims and all, but mainly about Consumer Affairs Authority and Standard Institution that you need to know. Right? Those are the two main institutions that you need to know in detail. All right. So now we'll see the aims of Sri Lanka Standard Institution. So now they prepare standards according to the national and international basis, children. Right. And that's one aim. They promote standardization also, right? And quality control in industry. Then they examine whether the locally produced and imported goods comply with the standard. They come and examine, children. They provide research facilities also for the activities of standardization. They implement a certification of mark scheme. That is also one of the aims. Then provide cooperation with international standard institutions, with similar organizations. And they promote standardization and quality control activities also. They can do that through guidance, through education, training, all right, these are the aims of Sri Lanka Standard Institutions, right? Then we'll see the functions of Sri Lanka Standards Institution. So what are the functions? They formulate standards. That's the first thing that they do, right? Then they implement whatever the things that they have formulated, they can implement. So that is another function. So under implement, children, you can see there are certain things that they do. How can they implement? They can implement voluntarily. So there is another one called SLS certification system. There is another one, pre-export investigation. Then import investigation. Then examination of seafood prepared for export. Right? All right. So these are the ways of implementing standards. Now, third one, implementing ISO standards. Okay. Then fourth one, organizing training program, right? So then promoting standardization and quality control activities. Then numeration services for equipment, popularizing consumer education. Then they provide library services as well, right? They sell local and foreign standards and information services. They implement international standards on quality system, right? Then Why the standard institution, Sri Lanka Standard Institute is important? Why? What are the reasons? The ability to face competition through selling products with SLS marks. Then ability to acquire advantages by overtaking production companies that do not possess SLS mark. You can minimize customer complaints, right? Then you can expand market share since government come forward to buy products that are with SLS marks, right? Then you can successful in international trade as well by obtaining ISO certification, right? So the acceptable level of product will increase because consumer needs and legal needs are included in standards, right? Then increase in the productivity also while minimizing the waste because you are producing according to the standards, right? Then by improving the image, goodwill of the company also, right? So these are the importance of standards, standard institution, right? So now you discussed about Consumer Affairs Authority and Sri Lanka Standard Institutes, right? So you need to know from these two organizations, their functions and their why the Standard Institute is important and why the Consumer Affairs Authority is important, right? So then once again, I'll just recall you what we have done. This is from consumer protection, right? So the basically what we have started from the beginning was like interaction between government and business, the lesson. So there we discuss the ways that the government influence occurs on business. Then we just discuss the examples on how government interferes in businesses, right? Then the importance of assistance and guidance that businesses receive from the government, then economic goals of the government, right? And the ways that the business can contribute to achieve those economic goals. Then I explained you the mutual relationship among the government and business. Then I told you there are two policies that we are discussing here, fiscal policy and monetary policy. Right? Fiscal policy is government revenue and government expenditure, and monetary policy is government capital expenditure and recurrent expenditure. Right? Then I gave some few examples for the impact of business from government fiscal policy and monetary policies, that is about money supply. Right? Then I discussed the main aim of the government monetary policy. Right? Then the instruments that used to execute government monetary policy: interest rate, then the three types: stand-in deposit facility rate, stand-in lending facility rate, and bank interest rate. Then changing statutory reserve requirement, then open market operation, change in the discount rate, imposing credit limits. Then qualitative and quantitative are the two types of credit limits. Then the impact of monetary policy on business we discuss from both the sides. Then I came for consumer protection. Then I explain you what consumer protection is and reasons for the need for consumer protection, right? Advantages for consumer protection for consumers as well as for businessmen. Then consumer rights declared by John F. Kennedy. Then consumer rights declared by Consumer International. Then consumer responsibility. Then I just gave you the list of government institutions that work for consumer protection. So from above, among those institutions that I told you that basically we are discussing about Consumer Affairs Authority and Standard Institutes. So we discuss goals established by Consumer Affairs Authority and their functions and why the Consumer Affairs Authority is important. Then we discuss the aims of Sri Lanka Standard Institution and their functions and why Sri Lanka Standard Institute is important, right? So children, that's all for today's lesson, right? So up to now we have discussed first unit, second unit, and we are done with the third unit as well, right? So hopefully I'm starting with the fourth unit next week. That is about business organization. That is a lengthy unit. So I don't think from one day that we can complete that unit as we did today and last week. So I need some times to complete the unit 4 because it's a lengthy unit, right? So under unit 4, under business organizations, we have to discuss about sole proprietorship, partnership, right? Incorporated companies, then franchising, public corporation and public organizations, right? Cooperatives. So it's a huge unit, right? So I think that you need to know in detail about that because there are so many questions that if you check the A-level paper, you can check so many questions come from that unit also, right? So hopefully I'm going to start the 4th unit next week, children. All right, thank you for joining, children. I'm going to stop the session for now. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Sanjeevani, for joining with us today. And also, I must say that our children can watch the earlier lectures from our Nanapur YouTube channel. And don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to get the notification. And also, those who are not yet joined to our Telegram group, you can click the link on our YouTube channel and join to our Telegram group because we are sending links to our Telegram group. And once again, we are thanking our Madam Sanjeevani for joining with us today, and we invite our lovely children to continue to be together with Nanapower. Then we will meet again with another lecture. Thank you.
වාණිජ විද්‍යා ගණිත කලා තාක්ෂණ වේදය විෂය ධාරාවන් වල සියලුම විෂයන් සඳහා විශ්වවිද්‍යාල කතිකාචාර්යවරුන් සහ රජයේ පාසල්වල ප්‍රවීණ ආචාර්ය මණ්ඩලය විසින් මෙහෙයවනු ලබන දේශන නැනපවුර YouTube channel ඔස්සේ නැරඹිය හැක. ඉදිරි දේශන දැනගැනීම සඳහා නැනපවුර YouTube channel subscribe කරන්න. දැයි දූ දරුවන්ගේ අනාගත ජයග්‍රහණයට